Hi everyone, Nubkeks here for a bit of a belated beta update for the class and legendary and spec changes here on Shadowlands. Obviously, we had the pre-patch this week, so doing the pre-patch coverage stuff sort of took some of my time, and then I've got some stuff going on in personal life, so yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy week for me to say the least. Also, before we get into today's video, Gold reacted to the looking through the DPS charts from the first week of Nyalotha Mythic in the pre-patch and seeing how all the different specs are doing like overall DPS. So he reacted to that, which was quite fun. I haven't actually sat down to watch that yet. I'll probably watch that during this week. I might even do a reaction of my reaction. I don't know. We'll see. But certainly it's quite insane to have that happen. Yeah, it's also kind of funny to me that was a really quick video. Like, that was just a video. Like I said, I think at the start of it, I'm pretty sure I say it's just a fun video, right? It was just, I sat down, I was like, I wonder how the specs are doing. Just made the little quick video. I think it's only like 10-15 minutes. It's really short. And just, yeah. People taking it very seriously. My goodness, all the comments and stuff. Some people they're losing their minds over that video, which is kind of crazy to me because for me it was just a fun little thing. But anyway, yeah, it's certainly interesting. So let me know if you want to see like a reaction to the reaction thing, or I'm probably gonna try get on and do a leveling stream during the week for the pre-patch again. Because I've taken the last few days off actually. So yeah, getting back into that would be kind of cool. I'd like to do that with you guys. I think people enjoyed the leveling stream we did last time. Anyway, let's talk about the class changes here. We're going to start with the Death Knight, of course. And there's been some interesting tweaks to this. They're definitely very much work in progress, I would say. We're going to see here with the Frost Death Knight that they've had a number of nerfs actually to Frost DK, which is definitely quite harsh because as we saw in the how DPS specs are performing video, Frost DK is actually struggling quite a bit, and they're certainly going to struggle more with this. So one of the first things that got changed is the Might the Frozen Waste. So this is in particular the two-handed weapon buff. Now only increases obliterate damage by 30%, so that's down from 35. So again, they just keep tweaking this here and there, trying to get exactly the right balance between the two-handed versus dual wield. Obviously the big concern with dual wield is you get the double rune forges. And then a bigger change is that Pillar of Frost has been upped to a 1-minute cooldown, and they lowered its duration from 15 seconds to 12. So it's gone from 15 seconds out of every 45 seconds to 12 seconds out of every 60 seconds. So that's gone from, a third uptime to a fifth uptime. So that's quite a big nerf. To that. So again, I think they're still trying to find the exact tuning place for this. I actually think a 1-minute cooldown is still fine. 1-minute cooldowns feel pretty good. They're short. So yeah, that doesn't bother me too much, but certainly the double nerf, the cooldown increase and the duration decrease, that feels a little bit bad for sure. But we'll see exactly where they end up. Like I said, I'm going to be covering Death Knights as one of the last, specs I do a final sort of review on for Shadowlands, because I feel like there's still quite a few, Unholy's changing all the time, and Frost as well. So I think there's still quite a few tweaks going on in there. For their legendaries, we've also had a lot of lots of buffs just all across the board, which is great. This is actually a theme of this patch. Lots and lots of buffs. Death's Embrace has been buffed. The duration of anti-magic shells now increased by 140%. And they also buffed back the Pheromones legendary. It's called Nightmare here in the beta right now. So you and your minions will gain 15% haste while inside Death and Decay. On top of also the CC effect. I think it's 8% haste now for the Blood Death Knight. Obviously, Blood gets, resets on Death and Decay. They've got very high Death and Decay uptime, so it's weaker for them to make up for that and to balance that out. So that's sort of the change there. For Frost, there's no changes to the Blood-specific legendaries. For Frost, I'll get the exact numbers here. For their legendaries, Biting Cold has been buffed. So it's going to now increase the damage of Remorseless Winter by 30% and also give you that free rhyme proc. So a slight buff to that. Kultira's Favor, I think this is fine. It's gone back up to obliterate damage being increased by 10%. So I think that feels a bit more substantial. They'd lowered it to 5%, which just kind of felt like, what's the point? 10% more damage, that feels okay, especially seeing as obliterate can be half of your damage or perhaps even more with two-handed build. And then finally, the Rage of the Frozen Champion has been buffed up to 15%. That was used to be 10%, so now 15% chance with the Blizz Ray to get a free rhyme. And they also, once again, increase the runic power you're going to generate from 6 to 8. So that's quite a nice little buff. Over on Unholy, there are a couple of minor tweaks, nothing too important. The big changes for Unholy, though. Yes, Death Certainty. This got quite a nice buff, actually. So this was increasing Death Strike and Death Coil damage by 20%. Now it's up to 35%. So that, I think, is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Some nice single target increase there. And then this one, the Leg Guards of Reanimation, the Shambling Horror, he got his damage buffed as well by about 10%. Actually, more than 10%, about 20%. Yeah, pretty substantial buff to his damage, so that's quite nice to make that Shambler a bit more attractive. And there you go, they are the Death Knight changes. Over for Havoc Demon Hunter, there's a lot of changes to legendaries. In fact, they have 2 reworked legendaries, just, well, brand new effects, not even reworked, just new legendaries. So if you were looking forward to the Half Giant Empowerment, where your Metamorphosis would double your size, movement speed, and melee range by 100% to double it, right? That's gone. And if you're interested in the Inner Demons legendary, where your Chaos Strikes just had a very small chance to make a demon crash out and do some damage, some chaos damage, that's gone as well. So yeah, I hope you weren't looking forward to those ones, because they're no longer in the game. But you've got a couple of new legendaries. The first one is the Fell Hunter Carapace. Let me get you the proper name for it. Proper name is Burning Wound. It's the Burning Wound legendary effect. Demon's Bite will leave an open wound on your enemy, doing chaos damage over 15 seconds and increasing the damage taken from your Immolation Aura by 50%. So the damage it does itself is quite low. I mean, Immolation Aura is doing 278 damage, so it's certainly still something. But yeah, it's about buffing that Immolation Aura, and certainly I think the attractiveness of this will be, will certainly be to, you can see it there, it's applied. Multi-dotting. Oh, this one hits you back. Okay, they've changed these target dummies. It might actually kill me here if I don't get to range. Okay. Wow, I don't know why they changed these target dummies. That's a bummer. Okay, noted. Jeez. That's the worst change of this week's patch. But yeah, multi-dotting, I think, certainly with Demon's Bite, hitting, let's say 4 or 5 targets with your Demon's Bite for your next Immolation Aura coming around, and that next Immolation Aura is going to do some better AoE damage. I certainly think that's the main appeal of this. I think that's fun. Every extra little bit of complexity you can bake into that kit, I think, is a good thing. We also have another new one called Darker Nature, where killing an enemy with Eye Beam has a 25% chance to convert their soul fragment into a demon soul fragment, which is quite interesting. So that does tie into, I think it's actually up here. Shattered Souls, that's what we're looking for. Where if the soul fragment comes from a demon, you do 20% increased damage for 15 seconds. So that's really the appeal of that. That is really the appeal of that. I think that this one in particular, this could be maybe okay for Mythic Plus. I think it's going to be difficult, though, in a group situation to kill things with Eye Beam. I think this in particular is going to probably be very good for Torghast, right? For solo content, for world content. I think this legendary could really shine for that sort of stuff. I think certainly that, that's what people are going to be, a lot of people will probably pick up the Havoc Demon Hunter for that specifically, as just being a good, fun solo class for people that like solo content in the game, which you can often forget about when I'm talking in these videos. But I think this is going to be very strong for that. Not sure if it's going to be good for other stuff. It seems maybe a little bit too difficult to actually get value out of. And yeah, then actually one other change, which is maybe a bit of a bummer for sure, but Fell Bombardment has been nerfed, basically. This was certainly the only interesting legendary, really, I felt before. But I think these 2 rework legendaries is a good step in the right direction, and hopefully there's going to be more attention for Demon Hunters to spice it up in this department. But this one's sadly a bit nerfed. I think it's still good, though. Immolation Aura, the damage from it now has a chance to give you a stack of Fell Bombardment. This is going to increase the damage your next throw glaive deals to your primary target by 20% per stack, and it will throw an additional glaive as well per stack too. So yeah, this is no longer going to be buffing the throw glaive damage to everything. It's just going to buff the damage against the primary target, but you do get some extra throw glaives. So I think this will still be very fun. Hopefully it will still be good. A little bit disappointed to see it nerfed, but I guess it did overshadow the other ones. But yeah, I think the big news is really we got a couple of new legendaries in there, which is good. So there you go. Looking at the Druid then, there's quite a few little changes across all the Druid specs. All of the sort of balance changes that were on the PTR, those buffs are now on the beta, so that's nice. I do believe that there's about a 5%, roughly just slightly under 5% buff to Feral Druid and basically all of their abilities, which I don't think was on the public test realm last week. But you guys can correct me on that. My brain's, I'm a little bit zapped, guys, to be honest with you. So I can't remember, but I have a feeling that wasn't there. So it's nice to see a buff for the Feral Druid. So that is cool. Let's talk about balance first. Or let's talk about the Covenant abilities first. And the first one ties into balance, which is Adaptive Swarm has got another buff to work better with Balance Druid. So first of all, this increases the effectiveness of your periodic effects. For the other Druid specs, I believe it's by 20%, but for Balance Druid, this has been buffed up to 30%. Again, the reason for this being that, well, you know, like Feral Druid bleeds, Bear Druid bleeds, and then obviously Restoration Druid heals. Those are very powerful. They're more powerful than the Moonfire and Sunfire, like the dots that a Balance Druid can do. So making it more effective for balance in that sense just makes this Covenant more attractive. And then they also, this is a very nice quality of life thing, they also increased the jump range for Balance Druid specifically, which does make sense. You know, as the Balance Druid, you are notably a very long range caster, so having a little bit more leeway there for doing some solo content and stuff like that, and having it bounce onto you a bit more frequently, I think that's a nice little tweak, that you won't outrange your own Covenant ability as much as you otherwise would. So it's good to see, again, it's good to see them continue to tweak Covenant abilities for specific specs when, again, Adaptive Swarm was quite solid for all the other Druid specs, but was really terrible for balance before these couple of changes, which is nice. Ravenous Frenzy has also been tweaked, and again, I think this is a really good change. So they had reduced it to 15 seconds in the previous balance patch. They've increased it back to 20 seconds. So you got your 3-minute cooldown, gives you the 20-second buff, and you can stack that up and up and up. However, they did nerf the haste value by half. So instead of getting 2% haste per stack, you only get 1% haste. Again, I think this is a really good change. I'm not actually aware of how this was affecting the other Druid specs, but I was certainly aware that for balance, there has been a few issues with balance, and I think these nerfs, some of the nerfs in this patch are actually good for the design of the spec, where they were getting so much haste and so much crit from legendaries and from Covenant abilities and stuff like that, that for the Balance Druids, they were looking at gear and going that basically all the secondary stats on gear were really bad for them, because they were getting so many stats from their sort of borrowed power stuff. So I think actually nerfing these down is good. It's going to mean that you're actually going to value those gear stats and those trinkets and things a lot more than you otherwise would have. So yeah, I think that's important. They also have nerfed, they've nerfed the Kyrian ability again. So now it's giving 20% damage as additional damage, healing or absorption, etc. So yeah, just toning that one down for second or third time in a row. I guess was overperforming. I get all the hype was always around, you know, Night Fae. This one, it's been a sleeper OP, but it's been nerfed down. Okay, looking at the legendary changes then, looking at those. First up, this one, the Draft of Deep Focus. This has been buffed a bit. So when Moonfire, Rake, Grip, or Rejuvenation are active on just one target, their effects are increased now by 40%. So again, it's making that a bit more attractive. That should be pretty good, obviously, could be decent for Resto Druid, certainly for Feral, not so good for Balance or for Bear, I don't think, but not terrible. So nice single target damage there, perhaps. For Balance, one of the big things is that Balance of all things, this was their best legendary by far, has been nerfed. So this used to give you 75% crit when you entered your Eclipse, and then it would decrease by 15% every second. Now it's 50%, decreasing by 10% every second. So it's still a buff that decays over 5 seconds, but the buff is just smaller. And again, like I was saying, I think this is actually good to nerf it down, because the issue that you're running into here was, well, it really started to devalue crit, that you're getting so much crit when you entered a new Eclipse that having any crit on your gear could very, very, very quickly become a very, very bad thing that you would want to avoid. So having this be a weaker effect just lets that sort of natural gearing and stuff that's supposed to be happening in the game just work, and that you're not going like, wait, which of my stats is like, which of these stats are a trap stat for me, which is not what you want to happen, I think. And also it's overshadowing the other legendaries. So I think this should still probably be hopefully pretty good, but won't kind of affect the balance druid in some weird ways. Then we also have Onet's Clear Vision. So this got buffed as well. Let me just double check. Yeah, actually, buffs in two ways. Buffs in two ways. So this one. So now Star Surge has a 20% chance to make Starfall free. That's up from 15%. Now 20%. And Starfall now has a 40% chance to make Star Surge free. This was a 15% chance before this. So this is phenomenal. Obviously, Starfall, you're only casting Starfall, about every 8 to 10 seconds depending, and that does take a lot of astral power. That takes a lot of maintenance, but yeah, it's not an ability that you're spamming, so certainly 15% chance would have been pretty miserable. If you're casting it could take you a minute and a half to 2 minutes with the old version to even get a proc of this with Starfall, kind of guaranteed proc, whereas now it's going to be much more likely. So I think that's good. And again, also good to see the Star Surge side get buffed too. That's really nice. And then the Time-Worn Dreambinder. Star Surge, this has been slightly reworked. Star Surge and Starfall reduce the cost of both of those. Essentially your astral power spenders here. Reduce the cost of them by 10% and increase their damage by 10% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 2 times. Again, this is really cool. So the damage stacking is new. So again, this gives you... It makes actually doing Star Surges during your Starfall matter a bit more, because you can kind of, you can't cast extra Starfalls. Starfall, you put the buff on yourself, you refresh the buff, that's it. You can't do extra Starfalls, it doesn't stack. But this gives you a way to spend extra astral power if you generate extra to actually get more damage. You can stack this twice and you've got 20% more damage out of your Starfall. That's not terrible. I certainly think that that's a fun little gameplay thing to throw in there. So yeah, I think these are really nice changes actually on the whole for the balance tree. Even the nerf to which one? To Balance of All Things. Even this nerf, I think actually has some good effects. So yeah, I think that they're nice changes for balance. Looking then at Feral and the Feral legendaries, we just have, where's my things? The I one got not this one. This one? Yeah, okay. This got a different name. Sorry. I wrote my notes in shorthand, and now I regret it. Okay, so in my notes, this is the Eye of Fearful Symmetry, and this is the Hand of Fearful Symmetry. So this one has been reworked a bit. Tiger's Fury makes your next 2 finishing moves restore 2 combo points. That's kind of damn cool, actually. So that's been upgraded from just 1 finishing move, giving back 3 combo points. And yeah, I definitely think that a big part of Feral, I believe, is going to be, going into Berserk. And Berserk is going to be restoring combo points as well. Right, Berserk is going to be making you restore combo points too. 2 combo points back with that, and then you're going to get you're going to get combo points back now with this, an extra 2. And you're going to be able to spam out a lot more finishers and do some pretty cool stuff and still have room to refresh things like Rake with the 1 combo point there and get your 5 combo point Ferocious Bite. I think it seems like a good change. And yeah, I think getting 2 buffed finishing moves out of it's going to feel pretty good. So I think that's quite nice. And then we also have a buff to Frenzy Band, which I think is also good. Yeah, here. So combo point abilities reduce the current Berserk. They actually doubled the effectiveness of the bleed here, where during Berserk, they cause the target to bleed for additional 100% of the damage over 8 seconds. I believe that's just reversing the nerf that was there last week. But yeah, I think this is good, right? It's your combo point generating abilities that are doing that extra bleed, and they're not that strong, like compared to, Ferocious Bite or to Rip or whatever. But yeah, still, I think that's cool. So there you go. Nice couple of little changes to them. And then finally we have, we've got Guardian and we've got Resto, 2 specs here. So Guardian, I don't believe has any mega changes apart from 1 talent tweak, which I think is probably good. So Pulverize has gone from a 30-second cooldown up to 45, but then the effect has also been increased as well. It now gives you 35% reduced damage from the target that you pulverize for 10 seconds. That's up from 20%. So this becomes a very potent, very, very potent single target damage reduction on a bit of a bigger cooldown. I think it's good because it this sort of stuff, it sort of competes a bit better. Then you've got Rend and Tear, which is the consistent damage reduction, and that's applied in AoE, though it takes time to stack it up. Tooth and Claw, again, you can sort of you can build up this damage reduction on your Maul, and that Maul is going to give you a small bit of damage reduction for a short period of time, and you can sort of decide when to spend those procs. And yeah, or then Pulverize, which is the guaranteed thing, but on the bigger cooldown, but it gives you a big effect, big damage reduction, guaranteed, but a set 45-second cooldown. I think this talent here actually becomes quite interesting and quite fun, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe your bear mains will be like, no, it sucks, but I think it looks good, all the talent resets. So yeah, that's what's happened there. And then for a couple of nerfs for the Resto Druid, just so they're legendaries. So the Dark Titan's Lesson may Life Bloom 2 targets at once. This used to buff the healing of the Life Bloom. Now it reduces the Life Bloom healing by 10%. I think that's still fair, right? 2 Life Blooms out. Life Bloom actually does a lot of healing, so it's still good extra chunk of healing throughput. But more importantly, that's giving you extra procs of your clear castings, of free regrowths. It synergizes with their talent. We'll hop over here. It synergizes with your talent where you can get effects for having Life Bloom on yourself. So I think that's good too. Like, it synergizes here with the photosynthesis talent very, very well. So I think that legendary is likely still to be quite good, but it has been nerfed. And then they also got Vision of Unending Growth. This got buffed as well. So Rejuve Healing has a 2.5% chance now to create a new rejuvenation on a nearby target. So this is actually quite a big buff. It went from 2% to 2.5, so you're going an extra 0.5. That's not that big of a deal. But effectively, like, relatively speaking, it's triggering 25% more often. And if it's triggering more often, it's going to be spreading more rejuves, and then those rejuves are triggering more often. I don't know how much that actually equates to an extra throughput. Maybe it's not really that much, but it's certainly a legendary where a small buff could potentially go a long way, and certainly makes it, because I would have said that this was the least interesting legendary compared to the Swiftmend one, extending the duration of heal over times, or double life blooms, or wild growth, making you cleave stuff. So yeah, I think this one could end up being good for just some generic sort of pad raid healing, if there's generic pad raid damage going on, like a Mythic N'Zoth type thing. So yeah, we shall see. Could be good. Over for the Hunters, almost all of their legendaries have been buffed. Almost all of them. First up, Nesingwaries, the trapping legendary. This has been buffed again. This is, of course, for all the Hunter specs. So now it's going to give you 45 focus when a trap is triggered. It also gives you 100% increased focus gain for 5 seconds. So that is quite interesting. That's quite interesting. So like BM, for example, they get a little bit of focus from their barb shot. Not a big deal, though. More so, though, potentially for Marksmanship Hunter, if you sync that up with, your Rapid Fire, it's a little bit of focus. But certainly for, if you think about a red buff, red buff Wildfire Bomb Survival Hunter, and spamming out some kill commands, that could actually get pretty interesting. So this is definitely one to look out for, I think. It could be cool, and there's definitely some interesting gameplay there. Ooh, nice mount, dude. Nice mount. They also buffed up the Soulforged Embers again. This now does more damage than it did before, which is good because it was certainly looking a little bit underwhelming, a bit under-nerfed. So yeah, again, it still has that 5 target cap, but the damage has gone up quite a bit. It does pretty solid damage again. For the Beastmaster Hunter, again, all of these got buffed. So the Hauberg of Dire Command here, this has gone from a 15% chance to summon a Dire Beast on kill command to a 20% chance. We've got the Flamewalkers, hi big boy, Cobra Skin Leggings. This went from a 15% chance to 25% chance on a Cobra shot to make your next kill command consume no focus. So that's much better. That should flow much better. The War Spalders here, the Quapla Eridan War Order, now reduces the cooldown of kill command by 5 seconds. That's up from 4 seconds cooldown reduction, which is good too. And then they also rebuffed the Rylak Stalker's Treads, not fully, but a little bit. So now when Bestial Wrath is active, your pet's critical damage dealt increased by 20%, which is definitely a good feeling buff. So I think that's good. Over for Marksmanship, 3 of their legendaries have been buffed. Surging Shots. Rapid Fire now does 25% additional damage. That's up from only 15%. So that's going to, I think, be pretty good. It's going to make your Rapid Fire and building around Rapid Fire more impactful. The Unblinking Vigil is the one that didn't get changed. Eagle Talon's True Focus has been buffed a lot. True Shot now reduces the focus cost of all your abilities by 50%. That's up from 30%. Certainly interesting. Again, would have to dive back in more detail into more hunter testing to really get a feel for this in terms of how focus cap you are going to be during True Shot and stuff like that. So I'm not 100% sure what this translates into in practice. But yeah, should be hopefully a good buff. And then they also rebuffed the Serpent Stalker shoulders again. So they had nerfed this to only hit hit only 2 extra enemies after you did this. Now it's back up to hitting 3 enemies. So that's a nice buff there. And then finally, all of the survival ones got buffed. Butcher's Bone Fragments, Raptor Strike increased the damage of your carve now by 20%. That's up from 15%. That's okay. The Latent Poison Injectors just does more damage now. So if you like that Azurite trait in BFA, well, they're making it better again in Shadowlands. The Tactical Wildfire Battle Gear, the Wildfire Cluster, they also buffed this a lot again, actually. So compared to last week, this now does, I think, 50% more damage than it was doing after they mega nerfed it. So it's back to where it was before. So again, if you liked this Azurite trait in BFA, good news, it's back. It's back, boys. And then the Confounded Rylak Stalkers legendary, they've also buffed as well. Raptor Strike now has a 15% chance to reset the cooldown of Wildfire Bomb. That's up from only 10%. So that's going to trigger a lot more often. So good changes. Pretty much buffs all around for the Hunter legendary. Over for the Mages then, they also essentially have buffed nearly all of their legendaries. And also, actually, before we talk about the legendaries, they gave a lot of buffs to Fire Mages, actually. It looks to me like about a 20% damage increase to Fireball, Fire Blast, Pyroblast, and Flame Strike. So yeah, lots of buffs thrown out there to the Fire Mage. Try give them a little bit of love. So that's good news. If you were, I think, if you were interested in Fire Mage, obviously Shadowlands has been looking like a pretty depressing expansion for you compared to obviously the end of BFA. So good to see them get some love. But yeah, legendaries, have been buffed across the board. So for the general ones first, we have the Expanded Potential. So this obviously got mega nerfed. They've buffed it back, not as much as they had before, but yeah, this was previously only proccing after they nerfed it once per minute. That's gone up to 1.66 times, repeating, of course, per minute. So yeah, that's going to proc a little bit more frequently, which I think is nice. The Cowl of Deep Freeze here, the Grizzly Icicle, fire and arcane damage against enemies affected by Frost Nova is now increased by 15%. That's up from 10%. And your spells no longer break it. So probably a very powerful PvP thing in particular for fire and arcane. But yeah, that's been buffed up. Disciplinary Command? I'm not sure how to say. Discipline. I don't know. That's been buffed as well, though. Casting a Frost, Fire, an Arcane spell within 10 seconds of each other. Increase your crit strike damage of all your spells now by 15%. That is up from 10%. And then finally, Triune Protector. Casting any barrier spell grants the effects of all of your barriers, and each absorbed shield has 65% effectiveness. That's up from 50% effectiveness. So that's actually quite a substantial buff. So if we consider, for example, that just having your one shield, that's a 100% effectiveness shield. 3 shields at 50% effectiveness is 150%. 3 shields at 65% effectiveness is 195%. So that's, if I did the maths right, that's quite a big buff. That's a really big buff. Increasing that from 50% to 65% is actually almost doubling the shielding value of this legendary, which is pretty huge, actually. So much bigger buff than it actually sounds, which is nice because it's a very, very, very defensive legendary. It's going to be very niche. You're not going to use this all that much, maybe in PvP or something, but I think this being powerful is going to feel good. For Arcane then, Arcane, all of their legendaries got buffed. Story of this. My favorite one is the Arcane Bombardment, Arcanic Cull here, as it's also called. So this was initially making Arcane Barrage do 40% more damage to targets below 35% health. Blizzard said, you know what? That's last week when they were mostly nerfing legendaries, they said, you know what? That's underpowered. double the effectiveness, 80% more damage against targets below 35% health. They came back this week and they're like, okay, Bob, Mage developer, yeah, okay, it's still too weak. Increase it to 130% damage against targets below 35% health. So yeah, they've buffed and buffed and buffed this one. So I'm kind of excited to try play with this one. Could be kind of fun. Siphon Storm, this got rebuffed, so you're back to getting 2% intellect with every tick of the channel of evocation, so that's good. Arcane Harmony also got buffed as well, so this was giving you 6% more damage in your next Arcane Barrage every time Arcane Missiles hit an enemy. That's gone up to 10%. Yeah, the effect now only stacks 30 times. That's down from 100 times, which was down from infinite, I think, before. Or maybe this wasn't in the tooltip. But yeah, I mean, 30 times. You will probably have to track that a little bit. Like, you could potentially get a few clear casting procs in a row, and with Arcane Missile builds, actually stack that up pretty quick. But yeah, I mean, like 30 times 10, it's like 300% more damage than that Arcane Barrage. Pretty substantial. Fairly guaranteed. So interesting there. And then Loop of Time, the Temporal Warp. This is just giving you a straight up second Bloodlust now. Straight up second Bloodlust. So Time Warp, it's 30% haste for 40 seconds. This one lets you do this even when you got the debuff from Bloodlust, which normally doesn't let you get another Bloodlust for that 10-minute debuff. Well, you can now use Time Warp and give yourself 30% haste for 40 seconds. So yeah, that's kind of nuts, right? That's kind of damn good. Just a straight up second Bloodlust for Arcane Mages with this legendary. That is very, very fun. For Fire Mage, all of the legendaries got buffed. So first up we have... Yeah, this is the Fevered Incantation legendary. Each consecutive crit strike now increases crit strike damage by 3% up to 15%. That's increased from 2% up to 10%. So it's essentially 50% more from this, which is good. The Sun King's Blessing also got buffed, which is nice because they'd really nerfed this. They haven't fully rebuffed it, but it's certainly better. Now it's after consuming 12 hot streaks. Your next non-instant Pyroblast cast within 15 seconds gives you combustion for 5 seconds. So it's essentially a half duration combustion. But I think that 5 seconds, that feels good. That's up from 4 seconds, which is a little bit punishing. So that gives you a little bit of time to actually play around it. So I think that's kind of nice. Then it's, 12 hot streaks. That's down from 16, which is a bit too punishing. So I think that's good too. Molten Skyfall got really buffed up. This was had been nerfed to 40 fireballs or pyroblasts. This is now down to 25 fireballs or pyroblast. Calls down a meteor, and hitting an enemy player counts as double. We'll see if the enemy player thing is double still goes live. But yeah, that is kind of cool. And then finally, Firestorm also got buffed as well. From 1 proc per minute to 1.66, repeating, of course, procs per minute. So that's going to happen a bit more often. And then finally, for Frost, they had 3 legendaries buffed up. Let me actually put this one back. So Frostburn is still the same. Icebringer, though, this one got buffed quite a lot. This is the Glacial Fragments legendary effect. So this was formerly a 15% chance for Ice Lance to shatter, and 50% chance if the target was standing in a blizzard. Now it's a 20% chance with an Ice Lance that they'll shatter, and 100% chance that they'll shatter and do this extra damage if they're standing in a blizzard. So that's a lot of extra guaranteed damage. I'm really buffing that up to compete with other ones here. Freezing Winds, they actually rebuffed this one a bit as well after mega nerfing it before. So while Frozen Orb is active, gain Fingers of Frost every 2 seconds. That's up from 3 seconds. So just more Fingers of Frost out of that. And then finally, we've got Cold Front here. So this was hilariously nerfed to 90 Frostbolts or Flurries. That's been reduced back to 60 Frostbolts or Flurries. Will bring down a Frozen Orb, and hitting an enemy player counts as double. So yeah, there you go. Pretty much buffs across the board for the mages. Over for the monk then, and we have a bunch of changes to their legendaries as well. What a surprise. Buffs all around. One nice thing as well, I believe... I can't remember if they'd already added this or what. My brain can't handle it. But right now, anyway, Expel Harm now generates 1 chi. So there you go. That's good. Expel Harm now has a bit more of a purpose. I believe it didn't generate any chi at the start of the beta, though I can't remember how they've changed it recently. But there you are. You can let me know. I'm sure you guys know. For your legendaries then, the general ones, we got a few buffs here. That Fatal Touch is still the same in its buff state, which is really, really nice. Escape from Reality got buffed as well. So, it still lets you, recast Transcendence Transfer again within 10 seconds after you do it. But then they buffed the effect here of the Vivify. So now, during the time, if you cast Vivify on yourself, the healing's increased by 70%, and its cost is reduced by 50%. So there's a typo in there. There's missing an and. But yeah, so that's been buffed up. So yeah, that's pretty nice. I think before what was doing, it was going to refund half of the cost when you cast it on yourself. So this is quite a nice buff. Just flat reducing the cost is much better for especially the energy-based monks. It's just going to let you actually get more casts out. You're not going to be stuck having to get to the threshold where you can cast it and then get the refund back. So that's nice. And then just 70% more healing. Again, that's going to be quite good for PvP in particular. This roll out, this legendary got a complete rework. So this is the roll legendary. This was formerly giving you an extra charge of roll. Now, during roll, you're immune to roots and to snares, which is definitely intriguing. I'm not sure because I haven't got to test it. I don't know if you're going to be able to roll out of a root. So if you're hit by like a frost nova, can you just roll out of it? I suspect not, but if you're already rolling, you should be immune to it, which is interesting. I presume that it would remove those effects as well. Not 100% sure, but that's definitely something to look into. Yeah, like I said, this week has been hectic, so I haven't got to actually test many of these legendaries myself, sadly. We're just trying to get this video out before the new patch comes in, so you guys know what's happening. Invoker's Delight, as you can see, is still mega bugged for me. I'll have to go try and make another one, but they buffed it again, so now you're going to get 33% haste for 20 seconds after you summon your Celestial, which is kind of insane, to be honest. That's going to feel really, really, really good. That was formerly 20% haste, which had already been buffed up. So yeah, 33% haste. Maybe it's a bit too much haste. I don't know, but certainly it's powerful. So there you are. Kind of cool. Oh, actually, one other thing before we go on. They did nerf your Covenant ability, Fallen Order. Fallen Order has been slightly nerfed. It used to summon in these like vampire ghost monks every 2 seconds. Now it's every 3 seconds instead. So that's quite a bit weaker. I believe it was sort of overshadowing some of the other Covenant abilities in practice and in PvP and that sort of stuff. So I think that change might be for the better. Let's jump into the Brewmaster Monk legendaries first. Let's go alphabetically here. So a few changes here. Charred Passions now has been buffed, so it's going to increase the damage of Blackout Kick and Spinning Crane Kick by 100%, or give him 100% additional fire damage, I should say, which will in practice generally be more than 100% damage increase because fire not reduced by armor. Mighty Pour has also been buffed, which is this one, the Celestial Infusion. Celestial Brew will increase your armor now by 25%, and Purifying Brew will have a 25% chance not to consume a charge. That's been buffed from 15% chance for each, so quite a substantial buff to that. And then Storm Stout Last Keg has been just reverted to how it was before. 30% more damage on Keg Smash and 1 additional charge. So that's really nice. So yeah, that's feeling pretty good. For the Mistweaver, I'm not sure why I put Windwalker ahead of Mistweaver there. I clearly, when I was arranging these legendaries, forgot about the alphabet. Tear of Morning, though, has been nerfed again, which, yeah, it was overshadowing the other legendaries. Now, Renewing Mist increases your healing done to the target by 10% for 12 seconds. That's down from 15%, which was down from, what was it, like 20% before? So it's been nerfed a few times. And then also 20% of your Enveloping Mist and Vivify healing is applied to targets with Tear of Morning. That's down from 25% chance. And I can't remember now if that was nerfed before as well. But yeah, so I think that's still a good effect. That's still a good effect. It's kind of like a second sort of mini Renewing Mist sort of deal. And it's still pretty solid. They also mega buffed Yu'lon's Whisper. I'm almost wondering if they might have overbuffed it. I'm not entirely sure. They tripled the healing that this does, which seems excessive. So I don't know. But yeah, anyway, when you activate Thunder Focus Tea, you'll breathe the breath of Yu'lon and heal 6 allies within 15 yards, which is a small radius, but it heals them for an awful lot over 2 seconds now. So we'll see what the tuning ends up being on that one. But yeah, big buff to that. And then finally for the Windwalker, all of their legendaries got tweaked actually. So the Last Emperor's Capacitor has been reverted back up to increasing the damage of Crackling Jade Lightning by 100%, stacking up to 20 times. So they doubled the effect essentially from when they nerfed it, reverted it to its old form, which is good because that's a returning legendary. Jade Ignition also got buffed. Just the damage of it got buffed from 40% of attack power to 65% of attack power. So that's essentially doing just over, relatively speaking, over 50% more damage from what it was doing in the last beta patch. Kiefer's Skyreach is still that one wasn't changed. Sorry, that's still the same. And then Swen's Battle Gear, they increase the cooldown reduction here, where Rising Sun Kick crits reduce the cooldown of Fist of Fury by 2.5 seconds. That's up from 1.5. So it's going to enable you to really get a lot more Rising Fist of Fury out there, which I think is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I think on the whole, again, really good changes for the monks. Yeah, lots and lots of buffs pretty much across the board to all their legendaries, which is very exciting. For the Paladin, they just have a bunch of changes to their legendaries as well. So for the general legendaries, the Magistrate's Judgment, this has been buffed / nerfed depending on what spec you are. So this was previously a flat 60% chance for all specs to reduce the cost of your next holy power spender by 1. As you can see right here, that's up to 75% chance for Ret. So it's buffed for them, however, down to a 45% chance for protection. So it's nerfed for protection. And it's still the exact same. It's still the flat 60% for holy. Yes, the Mad Paragon has also been slightly changed here. Now Hammer of Wrath will do 30% more damage. That's been slightly buffed, and it extends the duration of Avenging Wrath, or obviously any talents you take to replace Avenging Wrath or upgrade it by 1 second. So it just does slightly more damage than it did before. And then finally, from Dusk till Dawn of Dusk and Dawn here, this has been nerfed actually quite a bit. So when you reach 5 Holy Power, you'll get the Blessing of Dawn. That's 5% more damage and healing for 8 seconds. That's down from 6% for 10. And then when you reach 0 Holy Power, gain the Blessing of Dusk, which will give you 3% damage reduction for 8 seconds. That's down from 6% for 10. Certainly the damage reduction to me feels that's a little bit underwhelming. It might be nice to be 5 and 5, but I guess it's not a huge deal. For the spec-specific legendaries then, let's start with Protection. The Holy ones are still the same. So we've got just two nerfs to the protection ones. With the smaller nerf, I suppose, is this one, Holy Avenger's Engraved Sigil. This used to give you a 50% chance to instantly reset Avenger's Shield when you used it. That's down to 35% chance. Still a pretty solid chance, but it's a fairly big nerf. Now, the biggest nerf, of course, shocking nobody here, but the Bulwark of Righteous Fury. This has been massively reworked. This used to increase the damage of your next Shield of Righteous by 30% for each target hit by Avenger's Shield, and it would just stack and stack and stack and stack. And as you've seen in some of my videos already, Paladin was, it would be top DPS in dungeons, in AoE. It would be top DPS. No DPS spec really. Well, maybe Frost Mages, but very, very few DPS specs would actually be able to keep up with them. So, and this legendary is a part of it. It's been nerfed a lot. Now, Avenger's Shield will increase the damage of your next Shield of Righteous by 30% for each target hit, stacking up to 5 times. And it also increases the radius by 6 yards. So the radius increase is kind of nice, right? It's going to make it easier to hit targets with that. So that's quite good. That's a new effect, so that's nice. But the 5 stack cap obviously is quite a big nerf, because you could potentially get in, especially in AoE with multiple Avengers Shield resets, you could potentially get in like 3 Avengers Shields on like 5 targets easily, depending on how many. I can't remember how many it bounces to now off the top of my head, but yeah, stacking up to 5 times. They're just sort of limiting that. I think it'll still be strong, and it's looking like you'll still do strong damage, but yeah, that has been nerfed down. Now for the Ret Paladin, we have a few changes as well. Final Verdict got nerfed a lot. So this makes your Templar's Verdict becomes Final Verdict, which does the same amount of damage. This used to have a 50% chance to reset, or to activate Hammer of Wrath and reset its cooldown. Now it is a 15% chance to activate Hammer of Wrath and reset its cooldown. So yeah, that was nerfed an awful lot. So that single target damage going down. They did slightly buff Relentless Inquisitor back up, so now it can stack 6 times instead of 5, so for 6% haste instead of 5%. So not a big deal, but it's something, I guess. And then the Vanguard's Momentum. This was previously giving Hammer of Wrath 2 extra charges. They've lowered this to 1, but they've made the damage stacking a bit stronger. It used to give you 2% holy damage done for 8 seconds, stacking 3 times. Now it gives 3%. So yeah, I think that's actually a reasonable enough change. Yeah, I mean, the 2 charges of Hammer of Wrath could be maybe a little bit awkward to fit into your rotation because you got a lot of other stuff you need to be pressing, right? So having just 1 extra charge is still going to feel like a very good benefit, and getting more damage done out of it, that's probably a reasonable trade, so happy enough with that. For the Priest, there's only a couple of small changes this week. The first one here is a Disc Priest Legendary called the Penitent one. That got slightly buffed, where Powered Radiance now has a 60% chance to make your next penance be free and fire 3 extra bolts. That's up from only a 50% chance, so that's a decent enough buff. And then for Shadow, they have tweaked a couple of their legendaries. So the most exciting one probably is Talbodar's Stratagem. When you have Shadowward Pain, Devouring Plague, and Vamp Touch active on the same target, your Mind Blast will now do 60% more damage. That's up from only 30% more damage. So that's a very, very big buff to that. Obviously, that has particular synergies with... Oh, who am I talking to? Hello. Didn't mean to talk to you. That has big synergies with Psychic Link, where Mind Blast will do some of its damage to all other targets affected by Vamp Touch in 40 yards. So... yeah, I think definitely doubling the effectiveness of this legendary makes it more interesting because it was quite boring at only 30% more. It was something you wouldn't really notice. This is certainly a bit more noticeable. And then the other legendary, which has been a bit underwhelming, Painbreaker Psalm, that has had its insanity generation slightly increased, so Shadowward Death will consume 6 seconds of Shadowward Pain and Vamp Touch, do that damage to the target instantly, and it generates now up to 15 insanity, so that's up from only 10. So that's a nice little buff to that. I don't know. I feel like the Shadow Priest legendaries are pretty decent now. Another nice change, interesting change, is that Shadow Mend now has a specific benefit for Shadow Priest only. When Shadow Mend is cast on yourself, increases all healing you do to yourself with your own spells by 15% for 15 seconds, and that stacks up to 2 times. This is actually pretty good because, bear in mind, Shadow Priest does an awful lot of natural self-healing. Vampiric Touch heals you for half of the damage that it does. Devouring Plague also heals you for 50% of the damage it does. Also, obviously, if you pop Vamp Embrace, that's going to be doing some healing to a random nearby ally, which could be you, or if you're just spamming Shadow Mend on yourself, that's also healing. So you've got quite a few ways to actually heal yourself. This is a pretty big deal, certainly for PvP, and certainly for solo content as well. I think that's going to make a pretty large difference. That should be, especially in PvP, that should be fairly tangible for some extra survivability. So an interesting addition there for the Shadow Priest. Over for the Rouge, obviously we were talking about last week how they nerfed the hell out of their legendaries in particular, so a lot of those have been improved. We also have a few sort of general improvements. One which ties into one of the general legendaries we'll look at in a second is that Shiv now does a lot more damage than it did before. It was previously doing 20% of attack power. Now it does 50%, so it's doing more than twice as much damage as it was in the last beta patch, which is kind of interesting, and we've got a reworked legendary to tie into that. So looking then at the general legendaries, these have mostly been buffed. The Bloodfang Tongue Hood, the Essence of Bloodfang, this has been nerfed in terms of the healing, so now you heal for half the damage you deal with the bleed. So that's obviously down quite a lot. That was 100% previously. So yeah, there you go. Again, I'm not exactly sure what the tuning on that ends up being, but a little bit less self-healing. We have the Shadow Dust Locket, Invigorating Shadow Dust. This has now been rebuffed to where it was before, where Vanish reduces the remaining cooldown of other abilities by 15 seconds. So obviously very intriguing in terms of the extra utility spells you can get out of that. Mark of the Master Assassin. It's not back to where it was in Legion, with giving you 5 seconds of 100% crit after breaking stealth, but it's up to 4 seconds now, which honestly I think we could take that trade. That's fine. That's good enough. It's still very, very, very strong. Obviously, has wonderful synergies with the Night Fae Covenant ability, vanishing to proc this effect, etc. So that one is strong, but okay, maybe 5 seconds was a bit too strong. They had reduced it to 2 seconds, which was miserable. I think 4 seconds seems reasonable enough. And then maybe one of the more interesting ones, the Tiny Toxic Blade. Tiny Toxic Blade has been reworked. This was previously making Shiv spread your poisons and bleeds to another nearby enemy, which is a bit like, why? Now, this is what it does. Shiv now does 350% increased damage and no longer costs energy, which is kind of interesting. So when I pop this on, Shiv does about 1,400 damage, which is about the same as a 5-point Eviscerate. Well, probably not as much because it's going to do 50% more damage as Shadow. But, it's going to hit pretty hard. It's not terrible, and it's also free. It's only every 25 seconds, mind you. But that is probably a bit more interesting. Is it good? Dunno. But it's certainly a bit more interesting, that's for sure. Okay, over for Assassination. In fact, let me switch over to Assassination. they got one change, which is kind of nice, actually. They were obviously a couple of changes. They were obviously fairly upset that for them, Slice and Dice didn't really seem that relevant. That has been improved. Slice and Dice will now give you, for Assassination and Assassination only, 10% more energy regen. So it just gives them a little bit more of a reason to use it. Obviously, with Outlaw, your attacks are going to be proccing your mastery, and your offhand attacks give you back energy then. For Sub-Rogue, obviously, your attacks have a chance to give you energy and combo points. So it's already good for them. This now gives it a bit more of a purpose, a bit more synergy for Assassination, aside from just proccing more poisons. Over in the talent tree then, Venom Rush, which has been a terrible talent for a very long time. This has been buffed up. This used to give you 5 energy back when you use Mutilate against a poison target. Now it gives you 8 energy back. Is that enough to make it compete with Alacrity? Probably not, but I'm not sure. Again, you'll have to check out the Sims for Assassination Rogue to figure that out. It's not particularly interesting either way. So yeah, anyway, it has been changed. Looking then at the legendaries, these have been buffed across the board actually for Assassination. So Dustwalker's Patch here. This is now reducing the cooldown on Vendetta by 1 second for every 50 energy you expend. So that's buffed from every 65. So you're going to get more energy regen. We've got the Doom Blade, or as it says here, the Doom Bald. Doom Bald, where Mutilate will do additional 30% bleed damage over 8 seconds. So that's up from only 20%, so making Mutilate even stronger in single target. The Zoldyck Famil Training Shackles, another typo there. This has been rebuffed to where it was before, so Poison and Bleeds now do 30% more damage to targets below 30% health, so reversing that to where it was before. And then the Dashing Scoundrel, where Envenom increases the crit strike of your poisons by 15%, and their crit strikes generate 1 energy. So that was actually up from 8% in the last beta build. So I think this is gonna, I think that's gonna be pretty nice actually. That's gonna be pretty nice. I think that's kind of cool. So there you go. Over for Outlaw, they have a couple of tweaks as well. One of the tweaks is that I don't actually think this is a tweak. I think this is just a tooltip change where Roll the Bones now only costs 25 energy. Now, I'm pretty sure it was only costing about 25 or maybe 35 energy or something. It had said it was costing 50 energy on the beta. I'm almost certain that it wasn't actually costing that much, though. Almost 100% certain. So, yeah. But, I mean, obviously, it's good news to have it confirmed it's only 25 energy, because it could feel pretty bad. I mean, there's quite a notorious one. In fact, I got it right there. Buried Treasure, giving you energy regen of 4 per second. Hilariously, this buff with Roll the Bones, right? If with Roll the Bones costing 50 energy, that buff literally for the first, in 10 seconds you get 40 energy. So after 10 seconds of Roll the Bones with that buff, you'd actually still be at a deficit. You would have been better off not even casting Roll the Bones. So obviously getting the energy reduction is good, certainly for that one. Interesting change as well is that Blade Flurry obviously does some instant damage now. That has been nerfed by a third. It nerfed to a third of what it was before. So massive nerf to the damage of Blade Flurry, which I'm actually a little bit unhappy with. I thought it was kind of interesting that you could use Blade Flurry in single target, and I thought it was interesting that you could sync it up with things like Bandit's Charm or whatever, when you've got that bigger damage window to get a little bit of burst damage out or something. That has been nerfed down, so yeah, I'm not sure if you will actually use this all that much in single target at all now, but you'll probably obviously still be using this in AoE, of course. So yeah, interesting. Their legendaries also buffed across the board. So Bandit's Charm, this was down to 8% damage. It's up to 10% again. So yeah, 10% more damage done in red buff. It's okay. Greenskin's Wickers. This now gives Between the Eyes 20% chance to do 200% more damage on your next pistol shot. Per combo point that you spend on Between the Eyes gives it the chance. So 100% chance with the full combo Between the Eyes. So yeah, they basically reverted the nerf to that one, which is, it makes sense. Concealed Blunderbuss, I think they did a good thing here. They upped the chance from 30 to 40% when you Sinister Strike an additional time, so it's proccing more frequently, and makes your next pistol shot fire 2 additional times, which means that, okay, if I, at 0 combo points, I do a Sinister Strike, it hits a second time, this procs, fire pistol shot, I get, the 3 pistol shots. So that puts me to 5 combo points. So I think that works well. That's a good change that you're not going to be overcapping as much. So I like that. And then finally, Celerity got buffed as well. Adrenaline Rush now increases damage by 10%. That's up from only 5%. So that's going to feel a bit more impactful. Going to be a little bit more noticeable. So yeah, I think that's a good change. Then finally for Sub-Rogue, they got a. I think this nerf. I'm not sure if this was on the test realm. But enveloping shadows now only reduces the remaining cooldown of Shadow Dance by an additional half a second per combo point spent. So that's down from 1 second per combo point spent, which makes sense to me because, I mean, you could just be in Shadow Dance constantly. It's maybe a little bit too strong there. Certainly compared to Alacrity or Dark Shadows, this was certainly just dominating the talent here, so we'll see which one actually makes sense. It'd be good if these were balanced. Like, Alacrity is kind of boring. Forget about that one, in my opinion. But having, 2 charges of Shadow Dance, so more frequent Shadow Dances, or having okay, I only have the 1 Shadow Dance every 1 minute, or whatever the cooldown reduction is baseline, but it's now more powerful. I think that's an interesting choice between these two. Okay, the longer cooldown, more powerful Shadow Dance, or the more frequent but slightly weaker Shadow Dances. So we'll see exactly what the tuning ends up being on that one. But I think that it does make sense for that to be tweaked a bit. And then their legendaries have been, I think, buffed across the board as well. So Finality, now increases the damage of your next use of your whatever finishing move it is that you've just done. Eviscerate, Rupture, Black Powder by 25%. That's up from 20%, so that's not too bad. The Rotten still with the tooltip there, the typo in the title. This one has been actually tweaked a bit, right? This has been tweaked again. So now, this used to give you a buff for 3 seconds in the last beta patch. Now what it does is when you activate Symbols of Death, your next Shadow Strike or Backstab does 30% more damage and generates 4 additional combo points. So relatively straightforward. When you press your Symbols of Death, so long as you're doing your single target thing and not, a Shuriken Storm, you're just going to get full combo points, essentially is what this is saying. Just full combo points, go to town, right? You'll big burst damage out of that. So we'll see if that's good or not. And then we have Deathly Shadows. Vanish gives 5 combo points, increases damage dealt by 15%. That's to 12 seconds now. That's up from only 8 seconds. And Akari Soul Fragment. It's been buffed, but not back to where it was before, where after using Shadow Strike, your target suffers a Shadow Strike from the shadows 2 seconds later at 25% effectiveness. So we'll see. Again, I don't think that this will give us combo points. No, as you can see, it's just going to do the damage. That's all. But yeah, a little bit unfortunate there. So we'll see. They're going to get hit from the shadows. Bam. It's not going to give us combo points, but it's essentially saying 25% more damage from your Shadow Strike. So just higher burst damage when you're in your Shadow Dance. So yeah, I think that's a little bit disappointing. I kind of really enjoyed the combo points coming in and how fast it made your rotation. So I'm a little bit sad about that one. But yeah, I guess it was too strong. I don't know. A little bit disappointing, but there you go. Over for the Warlock, I skipped the Shaman. They just got a slight buff to the Healing of Fey Transfusion, the Night Fey Covenant ability. I figured that wasn't enough to go in detail on it, though. But for the Warlock, they actually have a couple of interesting tweaks to some of their legendaries. So one interesting thing, the Pillars of the Dark Portal, which makes Demonic Gateway instant cast and the first use doesn't trigger the cooldown, now has a new effect as well, where in addition, Nether Energy lashes enemies you pass through, knocking them away. So again, an interesting PvP legendary for sure. Wilfred's Sigil of Superior Summoning. This one is interesting. This has been buffed for Affliction and buffed for Demonology, but nerfed for Destruction. Again, just to try balance it out a bit more. So this is now twice as good as it was before for Affliction. It used to be 1 second off of Dark Glare. Now it's 2 seconds off of Dark Glare. For Demonology, again, they doubled the effectiveness. Every Soul Shard spend would be 0.3 seconds off a Demonic Tyrant. Now it's 0.6 seconds. For Destruction, it used to be 2 seconds off Infernal. Now it's 1.5. So slightly weaker for Destruction. I believe it was just kind of insane for them. And yeah, I think this looks like a really fun legendary. Like, this hopefully will be a good one and a fun one to play around that would work for every Warlock spec. So certainly for me, I'm looking at this one and going, oh, I'm quite happy with this, because I think, an alt Warlock for me is looking quite likely for, a fun range DPS spec. And hey, if I can grab one legendary that's going to be effective for all the specs, that makes me happy on my alt. Then we have we have a new legendary here. So this was previously the Mark of Borrowed Power, which was essentially it gave Cold Dreadstalkers, Chaos Bolt, and Malefic Rapture chances to refund the soul shards you spent on them, which is maybe a little bit boring. This is the new effect, or this is obviously a returning effect, and this is available obviously for all of the Warlock specs, where damage done by you or your primary demon has a chance to give the other one 10% increased damage for 15 seconds. So, I mean, maybe buffing your demon's damage is okay for demonology, but for the most part, you're just really hoping that this is going to be your demon buffing you. This does have 3 procs per minute as well. I'm not sure what the breakdown of where those procs go is. Is it entirely random or what? Could you get just all the procs going onto your demon and you cry? Or will it go onto you? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly how it works. Or are they separate procs? I don't know. I haven't tested it yet, but that's definitely something to look into. And yeah, right, looking then at the legendaries for the specific specs. So for Affliction, just one nice change, which is this one. No, not this one. Is it this one? No. It's the Wrath of Consumption legendary. Now this affects corruption as well. So this was previously just targets that died with agony on them. Now it's targets that die with agony or corruption will give you Wrath of Consumption, increasing all periodic damage dealt by 5% for 20 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. I think that's really, really nice, certainly for some bigger AoE pulls. You know, like if you got sort of like fairly big or like really weak enemies that die in just a few seconds, like imagine those big AoE, sort of trash AoE situations. I think definitely there, Seed of Corruption, where you can start applying corruption to everything. You could stack that up now with corruption. Whereas obviously individually dotting these really short-lived mobs with agony, that's a real hassle. And having to do that to get stacks of this would be kind of annoying. Now you can do it with corruption. So I think that's a lot better. Then for Destruction, they got buffs actually to a couple of their legendaries, which is also nice. So yeah, the Odor Shawl of Imriar, or however you say that, has been buffed here on these leg wraps for me. Now enemies marked by Havoc take 25% more damage from your single target spell, so really emphasizing that 2-target cleave effect. That was previously only 15%. And then the Madness of the Ajikir, this was previously only buffing the damage by 10%. Right, so now this Chaos Bolt increases the damage of Chaos Bolt by 25% and reduces the cast time of Chaos Bolt by 20% for 3 seconds. So they really, really buff that one up for that big single target damage. And obviously, I don't know, like, kind of weird because this will also work through Havoc, right? That when you do a Chaos Bolt, your next Chaos Bolt is going to do 25% more damage. So that will buff up your Chaos Bolts through Havoc as well. But yeah, kind of interesting there. So a couple of tweaks to the legendaries for the Warlock. And finally for the Warrior, again, it's just legendary tweaks here. The first one is the generic one, which is Seismic Reverberation, which they really nerfed hard in the last patch. So they haven't fully reverted it, but they've certainly buffed it a little bit. So now Whirlwind will do hit 1 additional time for 100% damage for Fury. For arms, it now does 80% damage, and for protection, it does 40% damage. But for protection, it affects Revenge as well. So yeah, I mean, again, this still seems maybe a little bit weak, but we'll have to see. For Fury, then, they got some nice buffs. Let's talk about arms first. Let's go alphabetically. Right, so first up we have the Battle Lord's Charm. This got tweaked. I would say overall quite a big buff actually. So they lowered the chance slightly. This was previously Slam had a 45% chance to reset Mortal Strike. Now it's only 40%, but now it reduces the rage cost of your next Mortal Strike by 12. So I think that's really good actually. It's going to enable you to just spam more slams and more Mortal Strikes. You're not going to be rage starved, which is definitely a problem. Bearing in mind Mortal Strike costs 30 rage. So that's actually a pretty big deal for arms, certainly for a single target. We have the Executioner, this Exploiter legendary. This got buffed a bit as well. So obviously for Condemn, I can't remember what it was doing for Condemn before, but whereas they'd nerf this for Execute to only increase the damage of your next Mortal Strike by 16%, stacking twice, they've reversed it back to buffing Mortal Strike's damage by 25%. So that's good because I think this is a very fun legendary to play around. I think it's good. And then we have one, the Enduring Blow. They've buffed this in both senses. So Mortal Strike now has a 15% chance to apply Colossus Smash effect to your target for 5 seconds. That's up from 12% for 4, which I think is a good change. For Fury, they got nice buffs actually. So they buffed Bloodthirst, Raging Blow, and Whirlwind, all of those by about 20%. So they're all doing a lot more damage. Obviously, you know, they're not your big damaging spells like Rampage, but that's still significant enough. So yeah, they're definitely looking to increase Fury's damage, which is nice. They also increased Single-Minded Fury again. They gave it another bit of a damage buff. Now it increases your damage by 12% for Fury. So that's kind of nice. They also buffed their legendaries. I think I'm going to put one on here by default. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, again, Single-Minded Fury. Let me actually show you this one. because it's fun. So now 12% more damage when you're dual wielding one-handed weapon. So they've been buffing that, just trying to keep it all in line. The cadence of Fujeda, this has been buffed slightly. So this was only stacking 4 times. Now it stacks 5 times, so 5% haste that you can stack up to. Not particularly exciting still, I have to say. Not particularly exciting. Nice it got buffed, but still not really blowing my mind. Reckless Defender did get buffed a bit again. They lowered the chance for it to proc. So this used to be 25% chance on Rampage crits. Now it's 20% chance, but it now reduces the cooldown of your Recklessness and Enrage regen by 3 seconds, up from 2. So I think overall that is a win. The Will of the Breaker here, this has been buffed as well. So now when Recklessness expires, your crit chance is going to be increased by 7% for 8 seconds in Raging Blow, refreshing the duration. That's up from only 5%. So to me, that's a bit more exciting. You know, there's a little bit of gameplay there, a bit more interesting than the 5% haste. You know, 7% crit. I prefer that, I think. And then finally, Deathmaker got buffed quite a lot as well. So now Rampage has a 30% chance to apply Siege Breaker to your target for 6 seconds. That's up from 20% for 5, so that's pretty significant as well. Siege Breaker obviously increases your damage done to the target by 15% for 10 seconds. So yeah, if you get that at the start of your Recklessness, you're going to be pretty happy. So yeah, interesting there. And then for protection, you've got 3 nice buffs and 1 unfortunate nerf, or excuse me, no, this is a reword, so that's actually changed, but not changed really. The Wall got buffed back up, which is good. Shield Slam now generates 5 more rage and reduces the cooldown of Shield Wall by 5 seconds. So they buffed both effects. It was only generating 2 more rage, so getting 5 more rage out of that, it's pretty damn good actually. That's pretty damn good. What a damage breakdown, by the way, 61% Icelands. Yeah, so going from 15 rage up to 20, pretty nice. Pretty nice. Reprisal also got buffed as well. So the first attack you intercept with Intervene gives you Ignore Pain, makes your next revenge cost no rage. They gave it a new effect that now your next revenge will also do 200% more damage. So I think that feels pretty good, turning something that was mostly utility into something that, well, really has an impact on your damage, and you're going to feel good about doing that. I mean, Revenge, as you can see, hits reasonably hard, so doing that 200% more damage, that's a nice buff. Now, the bad news, though, is that the Thunderlord Legendary got nerfed a lot. This was previously that every enemy hit by Thunderclap reduced the cooldown of Demo Shout by 3 seconds. So you get loads and loads of cooldown on Demo Shout. This new nerfed version, every enemy hit by Thunderclap reduces the cooldown on Demo Shout by 1.5 seconds to a maximum of 4.5 seconds cooldown reduction per Thunderclap. So that's a very, very, very big nerf. That's a very big nerf. Obviously, you're getting half as much cooldown reduction for each target hit, and it's capped at 4.5 compared to getting just a flat 3 seconds for every target hit. You know, you hit 2 targets with a Thunderclap, which is not... That's not unreasonable, and it's already worse than it was before. So, yeah, that's obviously disappointing to see that nerfed. I mean, I guess it was probably looking like just the go-to legendary in every situation. So they're just trying to make the other ones a bit more attractive. But yeah, it's certainly I'd say certainly there's going to be a lot of Prot Warriors. I'd be surprised if they weren't disappointed. Obviously, you still have something like Crackling Thunder having more radius. It certainly has... you know, Avatar reducing the cooldown of Thunderclap. There's certainly a good synergy there for sure. And then with Booming Voice. But yeah, I don't know. That's certainly a big nerf. So yeah, there you are. And there you go, guys. There are most of the changes from last week's patch. So I just wanted to get this out at the start of this week. I think this video has actually ended up being longer than I intended. Yeah, I will hopefully be just back to normal now this week. So yeah, please forgive this video being late and being a little bit more frazzled than usual. But yeah, hopefully we'll be back on track now for this beta patch coming out in just a day or two. So do stay tuned for that. Be out in just a day or two. We'll dive into the changes there. Again, this patch was sort of fixing a lot of the things that the legendaries that they broke last patch, they over-nerfed, fixing those back up. So lots of changes this week. Some of them exciting for sure. Yeah, some of those legendaries now looking very, very fun for some specs. Mages in particular stand out to me as being like, ooh, their legendaries are pretty good. Like Arcane Mage, those legendaries are good. They're good. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, especially you guys are more expert on your spec than I can be trying to look at all 36 specs in the game. If you're focused on just one or two, you can have a lot more info on hand in terms of what the sims are saying, etc. So let us know, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.